I used to write sermons for an annual publication. It was published out of Minneapolis. They don't publish it anymore, but for many years they did, and a number of people were invited to write sermons for the publication. And it was an interesting experience for me because, as perhaps you can tell at this very moment, I don't write sermons normally. I don't have a text. And so it was always an interesting experience to have to write them, and especially because they'd give me, word limits and things like that. I don't do very well with those kinds of rules. So it was an interesting challenge. And one year they contacted me and they said, we'd like you to write, and this year, instead of writing 4, we'd like you to write 8 sermons, and they're for the summer. And it was the summer, this year in the lectionary. And so I looked at the lectionary readings, and I got so excited. I thought, oh, this would be so cool. I can write sermons on these wonderful passages from Genesis. We've got this big, long saga of stories from Genesis, and it was going to go into the end of August, where we get the story of the birth of Moses. And I thought, oh, this is going to be so much fun. So I said, yes, absolutely, sign me up, I'll do this. And they wrote back and they said, great, we'd like you to focus on Romans. And that was a double whammy, A, because I had gotten so psyched about Genesis, but B, because I'll be honest, I was not terrifically familiar with Romans. I had read, the book, and it was back there somewhere, but it was not as present for me as it suddenly became when I wrote 8 sermons on Romans. And it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience because, sometimes you get an impression kind of what a biblical book is about or something, and then you actually read it. And if you're going to preach on it, you're reading it quite intimately and reading some commentaries and things, and suddenly it comes alive in a very different way. And to read portions of Romans and to experience Paul's conversation was really delightful. Especially because we need to remember this is a letter. Letters are not divided up into chapters and verses. At least I've never seen a letter divided up that way when it's being written. Much later they added chapters and verses to them, but when Romans is being written, it's one long piece. And so it really helps to read it as one long piece rather than these little chopped up bits. But the lectionary gives us chopped up bits. It was also a neat experience, though, to discover that several of the weeks that I was writing sermons on Romans, I would then read the Genesis passage and discover that the two of them kind of overlapped a little. So I thought, okay, I can cheat a bit, You can still pull some Genesis in. And this week is one of those weeks where I find that the Romans passage and the Genesis passage have something incredibly in common. But what they have in common is not the most joyous of things. What they tend to have in common is unresolved anxiety, which is not a great topic, right? We like things to get resolved. We like things to have an ending, preferably a happy ending. And that doesn't happen in these passages. The main cause of the conflict, of the tension in them, stays unresolved. They end, but they don't end with everyone, quote, living happily ever after, like the fairy tales are supposed to end. They tend to end the way real life does. It doesn't. It keeps going on. Now, Paul's dilemma with the Romans here is really quite interesting. It helps, like I said, to remember that letters are written in one flowing piece. So Paul has just written this wonderful piece that we shared, I believe it was last Sunday, the piece where Paul lists all sorts of things that cannot separate us from God's love for us in Jesus Christ. And Paul asks, can any of these things, and he asks these rhetorical questions, can the past do it? No. Can the present do it? Can the future do it? Can angels and powers do it? The bottom line for Paul is absolutely not. There is nothing, Paul says, nothing in all of creation that can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. So he emphatically makes that point, and he underlines it, and he writes it in big and bold. He wants everyone to know nothing can separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ. And then he says, but I would give it up. I would give it up if I could get my friends to accept this love, this grace that God gives to us in Christ. I have been so impressed by it, Paul says. My life has been so dramatically changed by the love of God in Jesus Christ. I would give it up if they would come to believe it. It's kind of like when we say, I would cut off my left arm for you to do such and such. I wouldn't really cut off my left arm. But I care about you that much that I would go that far for you to have this thing that I've got. Now, it's so important to remember, and I tend to point this out every time we come across a biblical reading that talks about Jews because our history is such a horrendous one. Paul is writing to his own people. As Paul defines it, he's writing to his own family, his own sisters and brothers. Paul goes to his grave proudly claiming to be the Jew that he was born. He never ever wavers from that. He never gives that up. So it's important to notice that he's writing to his own people, right? It's like with my own family. I can make all sorts of negative comments about my family, but I don't want you to do that, right? They're my family. I can say, oh, my parents are driving me bonkers because they're mine. I can say that. You know, I don't want to hear you tell me that my parents are driving you bonkers. None of us do, right? But we can say things about our own families. Paul, that's the context here for Paul. Paul can be sad for these people, not because they're lost. He's very eager to point out that they're not. But Paul has found something that is so wonderful, he just doesn't understand why everybody else doesn't think that it's just as wonderful. It's like when you go and see a movie that knocks your socks off, right? You go and see this movie, you come out of the theater and you're like, that was amazing. The acting was good. The tension was good. The script was good. The directing was good. This is the best movie I have ever seen. And you go running to your friends and you say, you've got to go see this movie. It's that good. It's incredible. And your friends go and see the movie and you go to talk to them afterwards and you say, what did you think of the movie? And they go, it's okay. Don't ever need to see it again. Wasn't that good? And you're like, what? Are you crazy? Like, this is the best movie ever made. That's kind of what's going on for Paul here, except he's not talking about a movie. He's talking about how his life has changed because of the relationship with God that for him has taken on powerful new meaning because of what he's experienced in Jesus Christ. And he's not saying that his sister and brother Jews are going to lose out because they haven't embraced this. He just wants them to enjoy what for him has been so incredible. And it doesn't happen. He wants it. He wants it so badly he can taste it, and it doesn't happen. It's kind of like poor Jacob, caught between the rock and the hard place in this story. Brother who he ripped off over here, cousin who he ripped off over here. Not a lot of good choice of where to go there, Jacob, you know? It is no surprise that he has a very restless night. No surprise at all. He knows if he goes back to Laban, Laban will probably kill him. He knows that if he goes forward and reconnects with his brother will probably kill him. Neither of those are very good options, are they? And so Jacob struggles all night long. He's on his own. He's sent his family ahead. And he struggles. And he fights with God, we're told. He fights with a stranger. It's interesting, the passage, the way it's presented, tells us very emphatically that he wrestles with a human being. And yet the human being then says, you've struggled with God. And there's a part of me, having had a few restless nights myself, kind of like Jacob, that I wonder if there was really anyone there at all. I think we can have really good fights with other people when we're all by ourselves. Right? You're thinking about things that you wish you'd done differently during the day, or you wish you'd said differently, or you wish this person had acted differently, or you wish that maybe you could relive the event from a different angle, or you're anxious about what you're going to say to so-and-so tomorrow, or what so-and-so is going to say to you, or what's going to happen, or whatever, and whatever, and whatever. You don't need someone else there to fight with. You're doing a real job by yourself. And that's what I think is going on for Jacob here. He's realized his whole life is coming crashing in with a huge thud. And he's not sure what to do. He doesn't get resolution. That's the interesting thing in this story. He doesn't get answers. He finds out later his brother is okay. And his brother comes along and says, yeah, we were kids. That was a long time ago. I'm fine now. And they embrace. And, that's okay. But he doesn't know that when he wakes up in the morning. All he knows is that he's fought with God. If I were Jacob, I would like to have woken up in the morning with that nice clear head where you go, I know exactly what to do. And when I do things exactly the way I think I'm going to do them, everything is going to work out perfectly. I know what other people are going to say, and I know what I'm going to say, and it's all going to be great. He doesn't get that. It's unresolved. But what he knows is that even though he's fought with God, God left. God is still there. And that enables him to get up, dust himself off, and walk on, albeit with a limp. I don't know about you, but I like resolution. I like to be able to say, okay, God, let's talk. God, I would like this, 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 and this. I'd like them in this order. I'd like them all preferably before 8 in the morning so that I can do things the way I want to do them. And God, you'd better do these because I'm a nice guy. You always throw that in, right? I get like that sometimes. And the resolution that I usually get from that is, right on par with Paul and Jacob here. What I do get, though, is the reminder that God is with me. That's the peace that I take away from it. In the late 1940s, when the nation of Israel was coming into existence as an independent nation, they were struggling for a name. There were all sorts of names that seemed to be good names for this country coming out of their long, long history. The name that kept rising to the top was Israel. The name of someone who fought with God and with people and survived. And they thought, after we have come through the Holocaust and things have been as horrendous as they have been, and yet God is still with us. And we need to remind ourselves of that. I find it very reassuring to think that after all they had been through, that the name they chose was, we've struggled with God, and by implication, we're still here. We're still around to talk about it. It's all that Paul gets. It's all that Jacob gets. It's all that God offers, is the promise to be with us. We want answers, we want explanations, we would like to figure everything out. And whenever one of you figures everything out, for heaven's sake, email me. Because I want to know. But I can tell you right now, that ain't going to happen. Because we won't get those answers. But we do get the answer that Paul has at the beginning of his concern. The answer that God is with him. The answer that God is present with him in Christ Jesus, and there is nothing that can ever separate us from God's love. And at the end of the day, at the end of the night, I'll take that and I'll hold on to that with all I have. Amen.